So the subject of Romans chapters 9, 10, and 11 is Israel. And Paul devotes all of chapter 10 to discussing Israel's failure to respond to the gospel of Jesus Christ with faith. If you look back at chapter 9, verse 31, it says, "But Israel, pursuing the law of righteousness, has not attained to the law of righteousness." Why? Because they did not seek it by faith, but as it were, by the works of the law, for they stumbled at the stumbling stone. Israel sought righteousness by the law. They sought to be right with God by keeping the law or by their works of the law, instead of righteousness by faith in Jesus Christ. Israel sought to be accepted by God by their works and not by faith. And if you remember, the theme of the whole book of Romans is the just shall live by faith. Those who are justified by God, those who are declared righteous by God, they live by faith in Jesus Christ and do not seek to be righteous by the law or by their good works. It's interesting, if you're taking notes, in chapter 9, Paul discussed the sovereignty of God in salvation. And now in chapter 10, Paul discusses the human responsibility in salvation. And so you have both parallel truths here in the Scriptures. You have the sovereignty of God and you have human responsibility. And it's important for us to keep that proper balance and not go to one side or the other, because both the sovereignty of God and human responsibility are found in the Scriptures. God is sovereign. And at the same time, we are responsible for our response to the gospel. And I acknowledge, I admit that we don't fully understand with our finite minds, our little pea brains, how all of this works together, or how they both can be true, that God is sovereign and at the same time we're responsible for our choice, but both are true because both are in the Scriptures. And so we need to believe both. And so if I say salvation is determined solely by the sovereignty of God and man has no part in his salvation, well, then I'm denying the verses about human responsibility. And at the same time, if we say salvation is all up to the individual believer, well, then we deny the verses about the sovereignty of God. Both are true because both are found in the Bible, and so we want to keep that balance between the two. And again, we see these two parallel truths depicted here in chapters 9 and 10. It seems that the Holy Spirit knew that chapter 9, where he talks about the sovereignty of God, that would cause some readers to conclude, well, God is sovereign, man has no responsibility in his salvation, man is not responsible for his choice, man is not responsible for rejecting Jesus Christ, man had no choice in the matter, and so man cannot be blamed for rejecting Jesus Christ. So after chapter 9, the Holy Spirit gives us chapter 10, where he talks about human responsibility. And so chapter 10, verse 1, Paul says, "Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they may be saved." Paul's heart's desire and prayer for his fellow Israelites is that they might be saved, that they would turn to Jesus Christ for salvation. As we've talked about before, remember, the Jews opposed the Apostle Paul. They persecuted Paul most everywhere that he went, and yet Paul's heart's desire and prayer is that they may be saved. His heart's desire was that Israel would turn to Jesus Christ and be saved. And like Paul, we should pray for the salvation of people. That should be our heart's desire, is to see people saved, to see people turn from their sins and to turn from their wicked ways and to turn to Jesus Christ for salvation. That should be the burden of our heart and our prayer and our desire. And we should pray that especially for those in our society who oppose Jesus Christ and who oppose us because we're followers of Jesus Christ, and who oppose our biblical worldview and oppose biblical morals. You know, there's a lot of people in our country that don't like what you believe. I don't know if you know that or not. And we should have a heart's desire to see them saved. Our prayer should be that they would turn to Christ and be saved. You know, in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 4, there it tells us God's desires that all people would be saved. All people, including those that hate us. You know, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus instructed us to pray for our enemies. And so we should pray for their salvation, that they would be saved. Imagine if the people in our society who oppose Jesus Christ and oppose Christians and oppose the Bible and biblical morals, imagine if they all believed and they were all saved. And so that should be our heart's desire. And if that's not your heart's desire, I understand that. We just came through an election, right? So we know if that's not your heart's desire to see the people that oppose Christianity, to see them saved, well, then pray and ask God to make that your heart's desire. I understand if it's not your heart's desire. I get that. You might be praying other things for those people. Not, salvation might be further down the list of things that you'd like to see God do with them. But ask God to make it your heart's desire. Ask God to give you a heart that yearns to see those people saved, especially those who oppose and reject Jesus Christ. Now,